Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I remember when this story happened, and a lot of people have sent me now this story, which is the update. A snowmobiler who crashed into a parked Black Hawk helicopter has been awarded $3 million. Michael Casey wrote this for the Associated Press. The federal government was mostly responsible for a nighttime collision involving a snowmobiler who nearly died after running into a Black Hawk helicopter parked on a Massachusetts snowmobile trail. Judge ruled that in awarding him $3.3 million in damages. U.S. District Judge blamed both parties for the accident, which happened in March of 2019. His ruling came out Monday, but he said the government was 60% responsible for parking the helicopter on a snowmobile trail. Now, somebody asked me about that. They go, wait, how does that work? Well, there are situations where an argument can be made that both sides are somehow at fault here. They both made mistakes. And a court can then ask a jury, okay, assign blame. Is it 100% this person's fault, 100% this person's fault, or could it be 90-10, 80-20? And so a jury came back and said it's 60-40. And because the government was 60% liable, they have to pay 60% of the damages. And so that's how that works out. Now, the judge did criticize the plaintiff for not operating the snowmobile safely, because the judge said he was speeding and was also wearing tinted goggles. Now, the man who was injured here is a Massachusetts lawyer. He'd asked for $9.5 million in damages to cover his medical expenses and lost wages, and he wanted to hold the military responsible for the crash. So his lawyer said, "We are grateful for the judge's thoughtful consideration of the complicated facts of the case. We believe justice was served and the decision encourages public safety. The government has 60 days to pay the judgment or file an appeal." The government did not immediately respond to a request for comment recently. Now, the man's lawyers argued that the crew of the Black Hawk helicopter that flew in from New York's Fort Drum to Worthington, Massachusetts for night training was negligent for parking a camouflaged aircraft on a rarely used airfield, which is also used by snowmobilers. So that's the issue here. There's a field that the government sometimes uses to land and take off with Black Hawk helicopters. That same field is also used in the wintertime by snowmobilers who ride their snowmobiles across it. And so somebody somewhere you'd think would have figured this out. The judge wrote, "The court finds the government breached its duty of care in failing to take any steps to protect against the obvious risk of a camouflage helicopter parked on an active snowmobile trail in a somewhat wooded area as darkness set. The helicopter and area where it was parked were not illuminated or marked in any way." Now, the plaintiff also sued the owner of the airfield, accusing them of both giving permission to snowmobilers to use the trail, while the Black Hawk crew had permission to land in the same area. He settled with a farm owner for an undisclosed sum and continued against the government. Now, the plaintiff was airlifted to a trauma center. He had a dozen broken ribs, a punctured lung, and severe internal bleeding. He's been surviving on disability assistance. He's 48 years old, and he struggles with simple tasks such as putting on socks or pulling up his pants, and he no longer golfs or snowmobiles. He said it was a mess. His lawsuit argued that the helicopter crew didn't do enough to protect him, including failing to warn snowmobilers of the Black Hawk's presence on the trail, leaving the 14,500-pound aircraft briefly unattended and failing to illuminate it. The helicopter landed on an airstrip approved by the FAA, and the crew members testified that trainings are often conducted in similar locations. But the plaintiff, who said he had snowmobiled on the trail more than 100 times, said the last time an aircraft used it was decades ago when he was a child, and he'd never seen a military aircraft there. I would like to point out a couple of things. They keep saying that this aircraft was camouflaged. Now, you tend to think of camouflage as like four-color camo. A couple shades of green, dark brown, and black all mixed together. But of course, winter camo is different. I don't know if they actually paint Black Hawk helicopters a different color. I don't know. I would have thought that black would contrast very, very well with white. But I'm guessing that the helicopter is dark and the snow is white. That's just a guess on my part. However, I was shocked to see that it weighs 14,500 pounds. That's quite heavy. Now, I know you're going to say, but Steve, no, it's not that heavy. Well, I'm going to give you an example of something it weighs as much as. My M35 Deuce and a Half Army truck weighed 14,800 pounds. That thing was heavy. Now, I realize a Black Hawk is a big helicopter. I understand that. But the point is, I'm looking at that number going, why does that look so familiar? 14,000 comma. Oh, that's right, because that's pretty much the same weight as my M35 Deuce and a half, which I no longer have. But I kind of wish I did. The government attempted to have the case dismissed several times, arguing they could not be sued under the Federal Tort Claims Act because a policy decision was involved. But the judge disagreed and said that the case fell under an exception. The court then also said that the government could not get out over a lack of jurisdiction because the crew members apparently weren't told they were landing on a snowmobile trail. The government also says that it could not have prevented the accident because of how do you light this thing up, and there's some issues there. And then they also claimed that the plaintiff was driving at 65 miles per hour and that he had taken prescription drugs and had had a couple beers before his ride. That's the argument that the government made. So in its own investigation, the Army concluded the crew members weren't aware they were landing on a snowmobile trail. They also questioned whether glow stick-like devices known as chemlights used to light up a craft would have made any difference. So the night of the accident, the man said he was over at his mom's helping fix a computer. He had a beer with dinner and another with his dad before setting off to meet his brother. On the trail, he drove in the dark alongside farm fields and forests before going over a ridge. His headlights reflected off something, he said, but he said he only knew it was a helicopter after the crash. One of the crew members of the helicopter found the man face down in the snow. We rolled him on his back, and I remember yelling or telling one of my crew chiefs to grab some trauma shears and space blankets from the aircraft, and he was gasping for breath. The brother says, as soon as I heard that somebody in a snowmobile hit a helicopter, I knew it was my brother. My heart hit my stomach. I just knew it was him. I went down there, and my father told me he was alive. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the night on my knees praying. And so the reason he's saying he knew it was his brother, I presume, is because he knew his brother was out there. And he was waiting for his brother to arrive. His brother didn't get there, and he said, but somebody hit a helicopter with a snowmobile. So it's a bizarre story on a lot of levels. Like I said before, I am not sure how this helicopter was camouflaged using these conditions. I don't know. But the court did say, and this is something that's also unclear, nothing is mentioned here of a jury. And so this may have been a bench trial. But in a bench trial, the judge makes a decision that a jury would make, along with all the legal decisions. And so in a case like this, you have to ask a fact finder, whether the bench or a jury, to assign fault. Is someone at fault? If so, whom? And how much fault do they have? Quite often, the fault is 100%. Okay? So you're stopped at a red light in a hypothetical situation, and somebody coming on a cross street because they're drunk and they fell asleep at the wheel, they veer wildly out of control, drive over a couple medians, and slam into the side of your car, which you are not moving, you're simply there, and they broadside your car. That's going to be their fault. Okay? Probably 100% their fault. If you are legally in your lane, you're just there waiting for the light to change. Okay? 0 on you, 100 on them. But there are going to be situations like this where someone's going to say, but wait a second. The guy, according to the allegations, was speeding, had alcohol in his system, may have had prescription drugs in his system. We don't know how much was affected, but that's part of the story. And he hits a helicopter. And so generally speaking, they'll often talk about how fast you can go when you're driving anything, right? And so they'll often tell you that even though the speed limit on a road, I'm talking about just driving a car, if the speed limit is 55 miles per hour, but it's foggy and there's slush on the ground and you can't see more than 3 feet in front of your car, you can't go out and drive 55 and go, the speed limit's 55. You are always required to travel at the speed which is safe for the conditions. And so that concept will apply just as much in a snowmobile, on a boat, personal watercraft, a Segway, you name it, you have to have control of it and not be operating in a way or at a speed which is unsafe for the conditions. And so I've been riding my mountain bike, give you an example, riding my mountain bike on a trail I know really, really well. and I'm coming down a hill. I'm zooming along, and I go to cut around a corner. I've done this corner 1,000 times. And I come around the corner, and there's somebody there stopped who didn't think people are going to be coming around that corner real fast right behind me. And I have to react and avoid hitting this person. If I hit them, I could say, you guys are in the trail, and you're right behind a blind spot. And they could say, and you're going too fast. You should always be going at a speed that you can control what you're doing and avoid danger if it appears. Now, a helicopter in the middle of the trail is obviously an unusual thing. What if that was simply another snowmobile? Somebody's riding along their snowmobile and it dies. They're sitting there tinkering with it in the middle of the trail, and then you come along. So the court, whether the judge or the jury, I don't know, looked at this and said, okay, there is fault on both sides of the equation, but it appears that the majority of it still lies with the helicopter crew. They landed their helicopter in a place that they did not know was a snowmobile trail, and they should know where they're putting their helicopter. Those things are expensive. They cost millions of dollars. Knowing the government, they cost billions of dollars. I'm joking. But number one, they put it on a snowmobile trail and said they were not aware of that. They didn't mark it in any way to make it obvious that it was there. And now somebody want to say, but Steve, wait a second. They're conducting like exercises. When you're at war, you don't land your helicopter someplace and then light it up so people don't hit it, because that'll just attract attention. Well, here, though, they're putting it down a place that it should have been lit, presumably, because it's a snowmobile trail open to the public. So whoever it was decided 60% the fault of the government, 40% the fault of this guy. Therefore, we're going to assign the damages that way. So he's going to get $3.3 million. He was asking for 9.5, but it was quite a serious accident. And the court did come to the conclusion that it was mostly the fault of the government and then partly his fault, but not so much that it caused him to not win. So there you go. It was a mess, as he himself said later. But a snowmobiler who crashed into a parked Black Hawk helicopter is awarded $3 million. Michael Casey wrote that for the Associated Press. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. If a man speaks in the forest and there is no woman around to hear him, is he still wrong?